Hey guys, Ollie the Vangaboys here, bringing you a brand new Angel Feather Premium deck profile. I've been working on this build quite a bit ever since History Collection came out, and I finally feel confident enough to post a deck profile for it. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, of course, as always, I like playing the V starter. Now, I've experimented with other Forerunners and stuff, and at the end of the day, a lot of them just plus you one. So being able to get the quick shield and draw a card is just really, really nice early, so that way you have the pieces that you need to see without having to make sure you don't have them. So right now, I don't see a reason to play Forerunners, but technically with the premium quick shield, it's something that I'm always open to. So now we'll get into what makes this deck different. Now, of course, because of History Collection, we're building it entirely around Gavrail. Now, Gavrail's got a couple of things that make this deck really, really unique and really, really cool. Now, it's not my first time using G units to build a premium deck. Remember, about a year or two ago, I was running Gavrail Prim in the deck in a more rescue unit-based build, but this time we're going something a bit more defensive while also still not sacrificing our offensive abilities. So her on-stride skill is pretty cool. Counterblast, like a top 3 card your deck, place one in the damage zone, call a card from your damage zone, it's face up, and give it 2k. That 2k actually kind of matters because it does kind of help you get over those force numbers, right? You know, like Angel Feather have been a protect deck in V. You know, a lot of our stuff is like 13 or 12k and 10k base, and force decks might be like 13k and 10k base. So a little bit extra does help, but also it just thins out our deck every single time we stride. And deck compression is going to be very, very important for what our end goal strategy is here. But my other favorite thing about her is her GB2 skill that every time a card goes in the damage zone, give all your front row units plus 2k, which is kind of similar deal, puts her to 13k base the first time you take a damage, even without a defensive. But when we use cards that give us our defensive rescue checks, or even let's hit and triggers in the defensive zone, we end up getting really big and really bulky really fast, making it so much easier for us to guard without even having to use cards in our damage zone, or even just stop your opponent from attacking. I mean, you hit 2 defensives, you'll end up being 25k, let's say 13k, 15k, and then 25, 35. Boom, now your opponent suddenly can't hit you with their cards anymore, something like that. So it's super, super nice. Makes it, it gets you more value out of your defensive plays. And then we'll go into the rest of our grade 3s. Now, Hamiel, of course, Hamiel is always seen as the Gavrail win condition ever since V. Now, my personal opinion, we're not playing her for a Sentinel Restrict. That Sentinel Restrict will come up and does come up, but the main reason we're playing her is for board building. So you on place, counterblast 1, call a unit from your damage zone to a rearguard circle, take a damage, and that rescue check could always be really nice. But the Sentinel Restrict is still important to our overall win con, but she is not the thing that you do every time. We are not doing, let's give all the power to Hamiel, 100,000, 5 crits, go for game, because in Premium, you have so much more ways to guard and defend that units getting Sentinel Restrict and high power and tons of crits almost doesn't even matter anymore. A lot of the potential of decks is ability to restrict what your opponent's doing, and also lots of multi-attacking. So this is just one element, and it does come up, but it's not our main end goal. She just really helps to build board, and that's why I only have her at 2. Now, lastly, this could be a third Hamiel, but I actually do like playing Relentless Dragon a lot. He is our standard tech. Basically, his skill is just you put him into Soul and call a top card of your deck. Now, a top card of your deck, cool, whatever, it's fine. But getting the grade 3 in Soul is actually going to matter, and that's going to matter on one of our grade 1 cards that needed a grade 3 to meet its condition for a Sentinel Restrict. And this allows us to get that turn 1 if we see him, but also just helps build Soul. He's something I'm kind of flirting with, but it has come up, so I do generally like him, but he's not super 100% needed. You could literally put in another Hamiel in the deck. And we'll go into the grade 2 lineup. Now, of course, with grade 2s, the MVP of the deck will always be Gavrail. Gavrail's Counterblast, add a card from your damage zone to your hand, take a damage, gain 3k. Works on both Vanguard Circle, works on Rearguard Circle, so she is a card that always is useful, even with her hard once per turn. Now, what's really, really cool is if you call her off of from using Gavrail's on-stride skill, she'll actually be plus 5k, which is really actually genuinely really cool, because that plus 5k does actually matter when it comes to how many cards your opponent needs to guard. Helps build up magic numbers pretty early in the game, even during your first stride. So Gavrail will always be super, super solid. And then some of the bit of the new support that we did get this year for V are the cycle cards that when you discard them when you're at grade 1 or less on the Vanguard Circle. Look at top 5, add a grade 2 or less card to your hand. This card is just absolutely insane. Just being able to make your write-up so much more consistent is so important in both Premium and V Premium, and cards that can get decks that are able to actually fit these in will do so well. Now, her on attack boosted skill is not amazing, but still really good, because Angel Feather does kind of suffer from a problem of being able to like draw cards and plus a lot, right? And sometimes you need those pieces, especially when they land up in your damage zone. But she's able to, for a Soul Blast, it has to be boosted. You take a card from your damage zone, add it to your hand, and take the top card of your deck, put it face down. Now, the downside is the card has to go face down. But doesn't mean we can't grab cards that are already counterblasted. So when you're paying your skills to counterblast, knowing that you can't countercharge just quite yet, not until like your next turn, you can make sure you're counterblasting. Oh, let's counterblast that Sentinel to pay for that cost. And then when you attack with her, boost with her, grab that Sentinel from your damage zone to your hand, put the top card deck face down. Boom, it works out. Basically, she gives you extra value for the costs that we're already having to pay, since this isn't the type of Angel Feather deck where you're always going to have an open up damage zone, even though we can always open up during our turn if we need to. So I think Prickly Nurse is great. I have her as a 4-of just for the ability to try to like get her early, because you know we are playing a tighter grade 1 package. And then for my last 2 grade 2s, I like Adroid Zane a lot. Zane gains 10k, which is really nice for building up numbers. When a card goes into your opponent's damage zone, he'll become 19k base. But then also, when you attack your opponent's Vanguard, you can choose one of your opponent's rear guards, take it, put it into the damage zone, and then they heal a card. So it's just board removal, which is super needed in Premium. You can get rid of pesky Honolys or Floodgates, a unit your opponent might need on their board for comboing on the next turn, or just forcing your opponent to have to call cards from hand if they want to be able to like build boards and things like that. So Zane just has a lot of multi-uses. Now he'll have to retire himself after doing his retire ability, and like we don't have like the protection that we get like Shin Malkuth gives him, like when that prevents himself from retiring on a protect circle. But the cool thing is too is that like with our deck and the way we built it, and with the next card, we can actually choose cards from our drop, place it in the damage zone, and then by effect calling them out to the rearguard circle. So the reason why I say that we have that, this is the true GOAT of the deck besides like Gavrail. Now the thing with Angel Feather, it's been a lot more complicated building it, because 2 of the best decks in the format right now are Gridora, Mega Colony, and Narukami, which are both decks that are control and control based, and just Floodgate based with Mega Colony, and doesn't allow us to do very much. Now, this isn't going to fix the game against Mega Colony, and I do have some other theories about that, but with its ability to have resist, your opponent can't at least resist it, and they can't slow your aggression down. So if you have both of these in the front row and you're using them as your main attackers, your opponent can't use their defensive skills to rest these 2 units. So you're always going to be able to get like your 3 attacks off at least if you have both of them in the front row. But against Narukami, it does a lot more, because Sweep Command, which is like their most popular ride target, has to choose, so now they can't bind these. And because they can't bind the front row, when they go into Exterminate, they won't gain any power. Exterminate requires them to have requires you to have an open rearguard circles in the front row, and they will draw for each one and give their front row plus 10. So suddenly Exterminate is shut down even if you have 1 in the front row, they're only getting 10k and drawing 1 card, which that does make a huge difference when they're doing 5 to 6 attacks. Suddenly you have 2, they're being shut down. Even Stunverse says choose. These have pure resist, at least from your opponent. They have units cannot be chosen by the effects of your opponent's cards. Their other skill is what I absolutely love about it too. It says Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1 when a card is put from your drop zone to your damage zone during your turn, and that's the cool thing part about it. It doesn't even say by healing or by rescue effect. It just says card from drop damage zone to drop. And if your Vanguard's Gavrail, which since we're building around Gavrail, we're able to use it, you choose a face-up card from your damage zone, call it to a rearguard circle, and put the top part of your deck in the damage zone face up. And that is an auto skill with no once per turn on it. So you can use that on your on-stride skill, and then, not your on-stride skill, with the stride skill of one of our strides off-scale, you can basically choose cards from your drop to call, or if you have like the rescue stand trigger that like puts itself back in the deck to heal one and take a damage, that gives you multi-attack during the battle phase. So Antibody Pegasus is such a useful card, extremely versatile, and does a whole lot for the deck. I was almost tempted to put up the 4, but playing at 3, I see it quite a bit enough. You really need Yafkael to be able to build up those resources early, and even if you end up like losing it to the drop, you're able to have ways of getting those back. So I just love the versatility and toolbox nature of Angel Feather, and that's why I love playing this clan. Now let's get into the grade 1s. Now I'm going to talk about our Sentinels real quick. Elementaria Sanctitude, pretty simple, right? Like, hey, it's a 1-card guard in Premium, like against Stride decks. Like, what else to say about it? Gets around guard restricts. It's just super important to have. But my other choice of Sentinels, besides like the one that I play in the triggers, is going to be Prime Plaster. Now, this is an old like V-era Sentinel. The reason why I chose this one is because when you place it on the Vanguard circle, you draw a card and discard a card. It basically just gives you hand cycle. The reason why is there have been a lot of games where like even if you have like, I have quite a bit of handful of grade 1s, even though I only have 7 targets that I want to ride. If it ends up having to be one of the right targets I have to have, I can at least draw an extra card and like discard my quick shield or something like that. It gives you just a little bit extra for having to be punished and writing it. Whereas, yes, I could run like the Cater Sanctuary standard trigger, or sorry, not standard trigger, standard PG, but you know, you're more than likely going to get more value out of this skill than you are like, oh, this is going to be the last card in your hand. Because if you have like no cards in your hand or like the second to last card in your hand, you might still be losing in premium. Whereas in standard, that does actually come a lot more impactful. So I do like this a lot. It's one of those things where you hate to have to ride it, but at least you have it to ride. At least you have a PG in the deck. So that's kind of my reason for using it, because otherwise our other effect PGs aren't amazing, at least for this particular build. And then the last non-specific Angel Feather unit that I like running is Hanali. And in reality, Hanali is like the best Angel Feather unit, jokingly. But with the errata, it's now a 10k shield, which is really nice. And the other cool thing about Hanali is that its skill to remove itself from the game now no longer affects you. So, like, if you keep Hanali out, that's technically a floodgate for both you and your opponent, which is not necessarily a huge problem for us, considering counterblasting isn't that bad. But also on top of that, your opponent could just remove it during their turn. So now the ability to remove it from the game and put your opponent under that floodgate helps us out so much. Like, even playtesting against Highlander, I no longer feel like Highlander is as much of a threat as it used to be for me. Like, the Highlander usually shut us down, but this just makes it so your opponent can't play the game. So Hanali is a no-brainer. Haven't playtested against Mega Colony yet with this build, but I even think like against Mega Colony, this will help us out a lot, because usually it's their super aggression which ends up shutting us down. So that is quite a bit. Hanali is fantastic. And then the grade 1s is where I struggled the most when building Angel Feather. But I think I've landed on like the ratios and the cards for a win condition of what I like doing the most. Nakira is simple, top 5, add a grade 3 to your hand, discard a card. Searches for your Gavrail, searches for your hill triggers. It's simple, but also because it gains 5k when a card goes into any damage zone, it's really easy to trigger her skill during your turn, and she's just like a 13k attacker, which can help with like magic numbers. And Lamedo is very similar in that regard. If a card goes into your opponent's damage zone during your turn, he becomes 13k base as well, so that's like kind of like nice for when you're trying to like play around like your attack patterns and trying to like goad your opponent to taking a damage, because then this could offset like a defensive ability, you know, a defensive trigger or something like that. But also if you have a grade 3 in Soul, which is why I mentioned that one grade 3 that from the standard that goes into Soul, counterblast, and your opponent can't call sentinels from hand. Now you have other ways of like putting cards into Soul that are grade 3s, like obviously like writing. Hamiel, after you use her skill, she will go into Soul as well. So that'll trigger that. But that one card makes it so that way you can always ensure having like a grade 3 in Soul. And so that gets you Sentinel Trick live. And even though he retires himself at the end of the battle, we have so many ways of getting cards over drop, back in the damage zone, back on the field. It's not that much of an issue. But this is the real win con. You usually slap this behind like your Vanguard, go into Zofkail, 4 to 5 drive checks, plus 20 to the front board. When you're doing that many drive checks, your opponent isn't going to quite want to like have to like, you know, use a Sentinel. They're going to want to use a Sentinel on your 5 drive check Vanguard, and to prevent them from doing it, they're going to have to overguard. They're going to have to like use up their G guards. They're going to have to use up some of their big defensives, and then, you know, they're going to have to make it like, oh, 2 to pass or 3 to pass, or even like no guard it, because guarding rear guards can be so much easier because there's no variable in their power. So it forces your opponent to have to like use up the resources early. It also catches them off guard too as well, because usually they see Hamiel, and unless they have experience against Angel Feather, Lamedo is just kind of one of those cards where, oh hey, what? You got another guard restrict now, so you might be able to get like 2 guard restricts or even 3 guard restricts during your opponent's turn. So super cool card. We'll go into the triggers, and of course you play your stride crits. Here is our 4th Sentinel. Now, usually I used to play a draw trigger, but because we're playing the new errated version of Black Spark Moonkar, when you take a defensive, this lets you draw a card, and honestly, when it comes to PGs, we have so many ways of adding cards from our damage zone to our hand, generating 2 markers with our strides. We just have multiple ways of being able to like build up like protect markers and like PGs and things like that, that playing more crits again finally feels nice. So this is like one of the more heavy crit builds that I've played for Angel Feather in a long time, because usually I was doing a lot of versatility with my trigger lineup. But Mooncar's errata is really awesome. And then also its ability to go into Soul, give your Vanguard 5k, and draw a card because we're playing Gavrail is also super nice. I've used that quite a bit. Helps you give extra Soul for resources, and it also lets you draw cards. So like, let's say you're using the grade 2 that Soul Blast out a card from your damage zone, and you have this, it basically lets you pay for that cost for free, and you're getting plus 2 cards to your hand. So super nice. And then with the hill triggers, it's pretty much also the same. Cassiel, but I am playing one errated Ravael. And the reason why is because when you guard with her, if there's a heal trigger already in your drop, you can bind these 2 to countercharge one or soul charge one, honestly, you'll never use the soul charge one. It's the countercharging one. And this is only because we have so many ways of counterblasting ourselves out during our current turn before we, when our opponent's turn's like going to start, we'll be like counterblasted out from like Hamiel or something like that. This lets us open up our countercharge before we use our G-Guard ability like Suriel to create like the defensive abilities to like counterblast with top card, heal, and take a damage. So this lets us be able to do that without having to take damage we didn't want to, just to open up a counter blast. So that's why I really like it. And then of course just the ability to defend yourself easily with the grade 3s. Heal triggers are always super nice on right up. And then with the stand triggers, this is my perfect ratio right here. Repharos just lets you open up your damage zone. It also lets you recycle triggers back in the deck, which is really important when we're thinning out our deck every ride turn. Multiple different ways of doing that. And then he's just able to like help you put triggers and things or whatever you want back in the deck, and fully opens up your damage zone too. So Gavrail can only like open up 3 of the stride. He'll open up like 1 or 2 more spots, so you can get yourself more open to use like Hamiel and your other counterblast for Sentinel restricts. And then Surgery Angel is just really fun. It's at the end of the battle, he's boosted, you counterblast, put him in the deck, shuffle, heal 1, take a damage, and that triggers Antibody Pegasus skill. So between him and Antibody Pegasus, that's like multi-attack combos right there, which is really, really cool. So I just think it's a really fun stand trigger. I've always had pretty good luck, I think, like any more or any... If you play any less than these, you'll never see stand triggers when you're attacking. If you play any more than these, you'll only ever see these, and they don't have the best shield. So I think 3 is perfect. A 2-in-1 combo is just like absolutely perfect. And then lastly, we're playing the new Over Trigger that came from Festival Collection this past summer, and it's just because it gives an extra crit, and the ability to choose something from your drop to add it to your hand is really important in Premium, and I like these more toolbox-centric cards, so that's the reason why I like playing him. Over Triggers are Over Triggers, right? We don't like them, but, you'd rather have them than not have them if everyone else is going to have them. So let's go into our G-Zone. So of course we've got Holy Seraph Uriel. I don't have the Eredit version, but this is the original promo right here. But it's on hit, just says that you check the top 3 cards of your deck, put a card face up in your damage zone, call a grade 2 or less unit. So it gives you 4 attacks during your first stride turn, which this is what changes up the deck, right? Because you're able to stride while your opponent's on grade 2. So let's say we're going first against Mega Colony. We actually have a lot more chance of fighting them because we're getting our multi-attack, we're building up hand, building up resources, and we're being a lot more aggressive to them and being able to do things like play Hanley against them to restrict them and doing. So we can kind of floodgate their floodgates. It's not a fun match and you really have to worry about your write-up, but we can at least be a lot more aggressive. And then, of course, it also generates 2 Protect markers. So, generally speaking, I have been playing Protect 1, but something I'm gonna consider trying to do is I'm going to experiment with like running like a Protect 2 as well. It won't ever be like, a thing that I'm always gonna end up needing to do. But let's say like decks against like honestly Bermuda Highlander. I think that's a good example where like I felt pretty comfortable with the PGs I had in deck. And so doing like a Protect 2 instead of Protect 1 against that build might make it so my columns hit slightly better numbers, and then also just being able to defensively intercept and things like that. But mostly you're going to go into Protect 1s. I'm just very, very fond of Protect 2. But it's cool to have it, not need it. I think it's one of those things you should always bring versatility to markers and stuff like that against your opponent if you ever feel the situation is better than going to that. Because this is the only way you're going to generate markers. Ideally, we're never going to ride Hamiel if we don't have to. But Uriel makes it so that way we can generate 2 markers, and honestly, I think that's mostly all that we need. And then, of course, you're going to be running Harmonix Messiah, so this is like kind of the last of the History Collection support, but the ability to do the Guardian Shield. I understand the next card's super expensive, and it's crazy that like the box toppers are in every single box, but then these are like only 2 per case. So I have the original one myself. I'd like the new one. I would love to have the SP of the new one, but that is way too expensive. So I don't blame you for not picking up that card at all, period. I don't think it's like 100% necessary, but it does help with how much more early aggressive decks are. Now going to the rest of the G-Zone, Gavrail is pretty much the only stride you're ever going to go into. Now, do I have other strides? Sure, I have, Black Seraph Gavrail, and I have Bazazel. Bazazel gives you a guard restrict. Seraph just lets you basically like heal 2, take 2 damage, which might trigger some multi-attacking, but I honestly never seem to go into those units. You can even run like the strides that like end up healing you and things like that. But personally, Gavrail does everything you want a stride to do in Angel Feather. The only thing it doesn't do is flip a card face up in your G-Zone. If this card flipped a card face up in your G-Zone, you would never use Uriel going second. But in my honest opinion, I think the deck you can actually afford, depending on your matchup, if you're going like second and your opponent strides first or whatever, or if you or whatnot, you can afford to go into the on-hit stride without going to this, just to trigger Gavrail's defensive ability. That's the important part, right? Because like you want to make sure that you have Gavrail's defensive ability live earlier. You want to be able to make sure you use the card that actually like persona flips in the G zone, because Gavrail does not do that. But what she does do is everything else. She clears up your damage zone. She can give you more drive checks, more power to the front row, and in combination with Antibody Pegasus, so if the grade 2 that calls a card when a card's like healed, in combination with that, you're literally able to use her, choose cards from your drop, put them in the damage zone, and the cards that you chose from the damage zone, you can call off one of them off of Antibody Pegasus skill. So these two are in great combination together, since we're now playing Gavrail as our heart card, because you still retain the name of your heart card when you stride. That's why the Gavrail is super, super important in this build. And so not only can you now afford to use Gavrail's skill to counterblast and call units, but she's going to basically also like countercharge you again for using that skill. So it's a free unit call from your damage zone, as long as you're not under Ghidorah. So Gavrail is absolutely fantastic. Now the rest of the G zone that's the most important is going to be like our G Guardians. Now Dismal, I play as a 1-of. Dismal is nice because I'll end up using it to protect Antibody Pegasus. So like against like an Arakami, they're gonna want to make sure they're gonna want to try to attack into the Antibody Pegasuses. So you can go ahead and G Guard with this, and the nice thing is because like let's say they're trying to use Exterminate or something like that, they're not gonna have a lot of power. You'll end up using this, choosing Antibody Pegasus. Now they can't get rid of the Pegasus, and they're now kind of stuck with that one for another turn. Plus, and then it lets you also keep building board and things like that. So I really do like Dismal a lot. And then these are kind of our other two 1-of G guards. This lets you Counterblast 3, choose a card from your damage zone, call it to the guard circle. So it basically lets you heal, but also you get to use that card as shield. And then Alith lets you get 5k for every card face up in the damage zone. These are kind of more situational as needed. I don't go into them as much. But the one G Guardian I go into all the time is going to be Serial, just because hers is on place, guard circle, counterblast the top card of your deck, put on top or bottom, heal 1, take a damage, and this can trigger Gavrail's defense ability to keep getting 2k every turn, while also in combination of any triggers you might be checking. Honestly, a couple defensive checks and like her Gavrail's skill can make it big enough where you're doing like 1-card guards, or even if your opponent can't hit your Vanguard at all. So it's super, super nice to be able to have that and keep going with it. And yeah, guys, that is my G zone. Now that I do have one potential like change that I might make to my G zone, and that's adding the Progenitor Dragon for United Sanctuary. I don't have him yet. I used to a long time ago, but I might get him again. The only reason why, and it's for Mega Colony matchup, because Mega Colony you can't Superior Call, but with him you're able to like Superior Call all the cards possibly from your hand and like draw 3, which is still kind of terrible, but it does make it so that way like you can build a board and not entirely lose your hand against your opponent, especially if you have to use a lot of resources to order to stride. Like if the only thing you can do is like pitch Gavrail to stride, well then you can at least like use the little cards you have in your hand, call them out, and then like draw 3 cards and still have something against Ghidorah and make like your 3 attacks that you do. And then stride for free rest of the turn. That's probably the only thing I would change different. But let me know if you guys like my deck profile. Let me know if you want to see more fights with it or else you want to see. But thank you guys so much for supporting our comeback on this channel, and make more content soon.